1. I live in Florida, and Hurricane Milton on the 9th of October was devastating for my community. During the storm, my neighbor's tree went down in my yard, destroying a fence and landing on my pool enclosure. There was damage, but it was limited. These things happen, and that's why insurance exists, and I immediately submitted a claim. The community was without power, internet, and very limited cellular coverage in the following days, but work began restoring the community. My neighbor came over to my house on day 2 of the aftermath to apologize for the tree, and informed me that they had hired a licensed and insured arborist. According to the neighbor, the arborist wanted to start on the top side of the tree, which was currently in my yard, so he would be out the following day to meet with me and give me a quote. I thought this was great, as it meant I didn't have to search for one myself. The following day, the arborist met with me, gave me a price, and I told him that before he starts work, I would have to check with my insurance to make sure he was covered. Not pleased with the delay, he told me that he was going to start on the neighbor's side. Growing up on a farm, having used chainsaws, I told him how bad of an idea this was. He shrugged and left my property, leaving his business card with the words, "Insured, honest, creative," as well as what he lists as a license number. A few hours later, while my wife was outside cooking on a camp stove, day 3 of no power, the chainsaws began. He makes a straight cut. I call him, yelling, saying I can already see the pool enclosure beginning to buckle. He continues. I tell my wife to get inside and begin recording on my phone. The moment he moves the trunk of the tree, the side of the tree in my yard catapults. The majority of the pool enclosure collapses, the retaining wall breaks, the in-ground pool cracks, the roof buckles, and I am left with over $3,000 in damages to my backyard and home. Livid, I call him both to say, "I told you so," and to demand his insurance information. He says he will email it to me immediately, and it is available on his website, but with very limited internet that was impossible. I tell him to airdrop it to me. Turn on my airdrop and wait. Text him, refresh the airdrop time, call him, text him, nothing. He blocks my number. Something I noticed that evening, when wireless data networks weren't as stressed, is that the website on his card isn't active. I also note that his LLC is expired. He doesn't have a license, and therefore cannot have insurance. He also got arrested in August of 2012 for beating his wife, driving away with the kid in the car, then abandoning the kid in the car so that he could purchase some crack cocaine. Suing him? No. He doesn't have the money to pay for any judgment, and I am more interested in making sure no one else uses his services when the region is just trying to recover. I buy his domain. I buy the domain of his first and last name. I buy domains for variations of his business name. I buy the domain to his mother and father's real estate agents' names. I build a website in 2 hours that details my glowing review of his character, his work, his arrest, his lack of business credentials and insurance, and the damage he did to my house, which all 15 domains route to. Theoretically, he could get a new LLC, right? I thought of that. Aside from the entire rebrand effort he would have to do, branded trucks, shirts, business cards, etc., I wrote a script that crawls the state corporate registration listing using his name, and automatically purchases the domains and variations of any new corporation names he registers or is an agent or officer of. Over the past 2 months, over 700 locals have visited the site. My site is the #1 on Google if you search for his business, his name, or his parents. He has stopped posting on his Facebook page, and his phone line has been disconnected. Hopefully he has switched career paths. As for legalities, I don't want money for the domains. They are not for sale, and were well worded to only speak to what occurred. 2. Okay, so I really hate scammers. I know everyone does, but I've been scammed out of thousands of dollars, so there's a special hatred in my heart for them. I've been messing with one for the past few hours, and it has been absolutely glorious. I got a scam email a couple of hours ago saying something about a PayPal receipt for me buying an iPhone. It had an amount number that I supposedly paid and an invoice number. I don't even have a PayPal account. But I also just knew by looking at it that it was a scam email. Unfortunately for the scammer, they put their phone number on the email as the number to call to ask about your PayPal transaction. I saw my opportunity, I called the number and made up a story about how I had ordered this phone and gotten the PayPal receipt. But I didn't see a tracking number or a confirmation of the order address. So I was calling to see if there's any way they could tell me when I could expect my package. Scammer took the bait. He introduced himself as Austin and asked me for the invoice number on the email, which I gave, knowing it was a completely fake number. He then asked me how much my receipt was for, like how much I'd paid. I said confusedly, "Shouldn't you already know? Aren't you looking at the invoice?" He told me the invoice number I'd given was invalid. I said that seemed odd because it was the one listed on my receipt I'd gotten. Immediately he got defensive and said, "If you don't believe this is real, just hang up and don't call back." And he hung up on me. I called back. The person who answered the phone sounded like the same voice, but I wasn't 100% sure. He introduced himself as Frank. I started in on my plan, and I said, "Hi, I'm just calling because the person I spoke to before hung up on me and it was very unprofessional." He said, "I think it was me you were talking to, ma'am." I said, "I think you're right." He asked why I was calling back, and I said I was very offended by how he treated me and hanging up on customers was unprofessional, and I'd like to speak to his superior. He declined, but before he could finish his sentence I said, "If this is a real business, you'd let me speak to your manager, so I'd like to do that now, please." He told me not to call back, and he hung up again. I called back immediately, and he said, "This is PayPal." And he introduced himself as Austin again. I said, "Oh, so you're Austin again now, not Frank?" And he said in a very defeated voice, "Yes, ma'am," which was hilarious to me, although I suspect he didn't really realize what he'd just admitted to. He then started swearing at me and demanding I never call him back, so of course y'all know what I did. I called back 3 more times, changing my voice every time, but he knew it was me. He continued to yell and swear at me, but I figured, as long as I keep him on the line, he can't scam other people, right? It's been like 2 hours now, and I call him back every few minutes. He took the bait about 5 minutes ago and introduced himself as Austin from PayPal again. And I started banging pots and pans for about 1.5 minutes. He swore again. It's been incredible, honestly. I'll probably continue to call him and save his number in my phone for when I'm bored and want to make a scammer feel a small part of the way I felt when I got scammed. Three. This happened a few months ago, but I was reminded now. So I was 2 months in the job hunt, and I was getting crazy of the rejections I was getting. Urgh. There are companies I want to work at, but they aren't advertising for the position I wanted. I decided to try out a different method. I read online that some jobs are not advertised, but they will still hire due to referrals, internal hiring, and due to career fairs. There was a restaurant company I wanted to work at. The thing is, I don't know if there was a data-related position there. I do have my mom's networks there, she is friends with the current CEO, but I kind of feel embarrassed because I want to try building a connection myself, and the CEO was involved, so things might get out of control. I knew a friend of a friend who worked there. He doesn't work there now, but he did. I asked the guy if such a position exists, and he said yes. There is a data analyst position, and he gave me the name of the hiring manager. He just told me, "I hope he's still the hiring manager, though. I resigned in December." That's when I upgraded LinkedIn to Premium for a 1-month trial and try messaging hiring managers. That company was my first try. I composed my message saying, "Good morning," I gave my name, "and I would like to know if you have a data analyst position and if you're hiring. Here is my CV, and I hope you have the chance to read it." Kept it short and simple, however, he replied to me a day later and said this. "Good morning, sir. What you're doing is very rude and unprofessional. If we are hiring, we will post it online. Doing this makes you sound desperate, and these are the people who don't deserve to work here. Yes, we have the data analyst position, and no, we're not hiring, so don't message me or any hiring managers, because if they're hiring, they will post it. Goodbye." He berated me for asking a question. What did I do to annoy him? I was just asking if the position was available. He could have said, "Hi, we currently don't have any open positions, so try when it's available next time," or something else, but he had to call me rude and desperate. Thankfully, I had my mom's connections with the CEO. No, I am not going to use it to force my way into getting a job there. That would be very spoiled. Instead, I told my mom about what I did. She did agree that if they were hiring, they would post it, but disagreed with his response. The response seemed very unprofessional. So she told the CEO about it, and what happened next was 2 days later. The hiring manager messaged me and apologized for his behavior. He told me he is sorry, but I should really not message hiring managers if there is a job opening, if there is nothing advertised. Whatever, I bet he's acting like that because he got scolded, but will still act like that to his subordinates. I'm not going to work there if he's still there. Well, now I got a job offer with the company from the guy. He also listed other things about the job, like shift and setup. I decided to decline. To be honest, I am happy where I am now. Yes, this was a dream job offer, but the benefits I'm having are good. This job that I got an interview for has a 9 to 6 schedule, which I do not want. On-site setup, mine is hybrid, is quite distant and pays the same. It's just that also I do not want to work under him. I don't know what he's like, and that response from him a few months ago was really unprofessional. Hellfreezer's note, perhaps that day someone peed in his Cheerios, who knows. But what you did is not a bad thing. It shows that you're assertive. It shows that you're eager to work there. If anything, that is something that hiring managers should be looking for. As you said, all he needed to say was no jobs available at this time. But there will be people that do what you did. They'll get in at the right time. And as you say, there are some jobs that just don't get advertised. It's a valid technique, and you shouldn't feel bad about having tried it. Also, if it ever comes up and you get the opportunity to tell them why you declined to take the job there, make sure you tell them why. It was because of Mr. Farty Man. 4. Dear gods, this was satisfyingly petty and I just had to share. I'm a 30-year-old woman, went to the grocery store to pick up prescriptions for myself and my 2 roommates, who happened to be my amazing grandma, 73, and great-grandmother, 94. While on my way out, I decided to grab one of the $35 value packs of fireworks for the 4th of July, which was the next day. They were really excited, and it made me just as excited, as I like setting things on fire. Legally. Last important note for this story is we live in a trailer park that used to be a 55-plus community. It hasn't been for at least 5 years. Anyhow, here's the juice. I went out and started setting up a sunset. I moved cars, cleaned up the area, wet the ground to cool it down, and dampened the house and bark dust. I also set up a 5-gallon water bucket and about 1/3 filled to put our used fireworks into. Where I live, you can't have anything that shoots into the air like a projectile. Only fountains and such are allowed. Doesn't stop people from crossing to other states to get the big boys, but I am not one of them. My neighbors were, though. It will come up later. So I help my 94-year-old great-grandma down, and we get set up in the driveway and start setting off smaller fountains. The snaps and crackles of a couple caught us very off guard. We were having a blast. About 15 minutes into it, a car stops and waits for our current fountain to finish, or so I thought. The driver, an elderly woman in her 70s, it looked like, gets out and shouts at us that we're not allowed to shoot off fireworks on park property. I look at her a bit dumbfounded and ask her what she said. She repeated herself and told us if we continued, we would be put up for eviction from our property. I asked her if she was park management, and she replied she wasn't, but she was head of the park's rules committee, and had been since we moved here in 2016. We had never heard of it after living here since 2014. She snapped that it is in our rules and we need to read up on them and cease our violation of the rules or she would have us kicked out. She finally went on her way and I scoffed a little. My grandmas were both a little shaken and told me to just stop. But I felt petty. So with my thousands of hours of body cams and listening to entitled people on r/, I looked down and remembered. My phone had been recording the entire time because I was filming our fireworks. So I went for a walk, wondering who this lady was. I spotted some familiar neighbors who have been here for over 20 years, and I asked them if we had a park rules committee. All 3 of them stared at me like I had 7 heads. Yeah, that's what I thought. I asked them about the rules, and the eldest confirmed it wasn't allowed, but as long as we were being safe, no one was going to give us trouble. I told her about my setup and showed her the video of the lady. They were dumbfounded and said she was full of it. As I was walking back, I spotted her standing in her front yard, staring at me. It was right across from the sweet old lady's house. So I pointed and yelled, "Hey, there she is. It's the Parks Rules Committee head." She glared at me and snapped, "I am the head of the Parks Rules Committee." The elderly man, who walks his dog 3 times a day, that was behind me scoffed and went, "Oh, you're not, lady? Happy 4th." She was angry and stormed back into her house. That wasn't the pettiest part, though, because remember my neighbors? They were a bit younger, like me. When I told them what had happened, they started setting off the biggest, loudest ones because we all live pretty close by. I hope she had a good 4th, honestly. I'll update you when I get our eviction notice. Happy Independence Day. Stay petty, America. You know what I mean. 5. Working under a toxic, micromanaging boss can feel like a slow descent into madness. Every task, no matter how small, is subject to scrutiny. Every email is critiqued. Every idea is dismissed unless it aligns with their vision. If you've ever been in this position, you know the unique frustration of having your competence questioned at every turn. That was my life until one day I decided enough was enough. My boss, Mark, was the quintessential micromanager. He hovered over everyone in the office, demanding daily reports and nitpicking them for typos instead of substance. Deadlines became irrelevant because Mark would rewrite everything himself anyway. Meetings felt like interrogations, with him pacing the room and asking questions that made us feel like children caught misbehaving. At first I tried to adapt. I thought maybe his constant meddling was a reflection of his own anxiety. So I started giving him more updates, thinking transparency would build trust. It didn't. Instead, it gave him more opportunities to criticize. If I sent him an email about a project, he'd reply with a list of corrections, so long it would have been easier to start over. If I took initiative without consulting him, I'd get a lecture about following proper channels. The breaking point came when, during a team presentation, I spent weeks preparing, crafting a detailed proposal I was proud of. But as soon as I stood in front of the room ready to speak, Mark interrupted me less than 2 minutes in. He dismissed my work, claiming it was off target, and took over the presentation, flipping through my slides as if they were his own. My colleagues avoided my gaze, and I stood there humiliated. That night I couldn't sleep. Mark's behavior wasn't just annoying, it was sabotaging the team's morale and productivity. I realized I had 2 choices: continue being a victim of his tyranny or find a way to expose the flaw in his approach. I chose the latter. Mark's greatest weakness was his need for control. He believed he was the smartest person in the room and that the team couldn't function without his input. So I decided to use that arrogance against him. I started by following his instructions to the letter, but only in the most literal sense. If he asked for a daily update, I sent him an exhaustive email detailing every trivial task I did, from answering emails to refilling my water bottle. If he wanted to review a project, I'd include so many drafts, notes, and supporting documents that it took hours to sift through. My colleagues joined in, flooding his inbox with a tidal wave of unnecessary information. Mark began to buckle under the pressure. He started missing meetings and delaying his feedback because he was too busy trying to keep up with the mountain of updates. The very control he craved was now consuming him. One day, Mark called me into his office. He looked exhausted, his desk buried under stacks of papers and reports. "This is too much," he said, rubbing his temples. "You don't need to send me every little detail." "Oh," I replied innocently. "I thought you wanted to stay on top of everything. I just wanted to make sure you had all the information you needed." He stared at me, realizing he had been outmaneuvered. For the first time, I saw a flicker of humility in his eyes. He mumbled something about delegating more and dismissed me. From that day forward, Mark's behavior began to change. He loosened his grip on the team, trusting us to handle our responsibilities without constant interference. It wasn't an overnight transformation, old habits die hard, but the overwhelming flood of micromanaged details had taught him a valuable lesson. Control without balance leads to chaos. Working under Mark never became a dream job, but it became bearable, and more importantly, I learned something about myself. I learned that standing up to a bully, even in subtle ways, can shift the power dynamic. I learned that sometimes the best way to teach someone a lesson is to let them experience the consequences of their own behavior. If you're stuck with a toxic boss, know this. You have more power than you think. Sometimes it's not about confronting them directly, it's about finding their blind spot and letting them trip over it. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 394. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button, and also subscribe if you haven't done so already, and to support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. Channel memberships are also available. Alright, no more business today, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day, and today's question is: has a small cost ever put you off spending money on something? Right, I've got this old laptop there, very, very old, and I'm currently in the process of fixing it up to make it usable just so I can have a computer in the bedroom just for watching TV and movies. You've probably heard me mention that before. And as it's older, not really worth buying new parts for it. In some cases, it would be hard to find them. So I was looking to upgrade the RAM, as well as get a new hard drive, maybe a new hard drive for it, because it's still running Windows 7. In fact, the last time it was updated was 2015, to give you an idea of how old it is, and the last time I had it on was 2016, I think. So I thought, alright, it's capable, I know it's capable from what I've looked up of holding 8 gig RAM. I only had 4 in it, so I'll get the 8 gig RAM. So I went to a place called CEX, which sells used items in good condition in varying grades, and you do get a guarantee with it, so I feel a bit more confident buying from them. This would be the first time making a purchase from them. Until I noticed they have a delivery charge. Now, I don't object to that. I understand not everywhere can be Amazon where you get your free Prime delivery, all that sweet stuff. But they have a delivery charge per item. So I was ordering 2 sticks of RAM. They're presumably coming from the same stock, the same warehouse, wherever they're being held. And they're going to the same place, they'll be in the same package, but they're charging me a delivery cost per stick of RAM, which weighs almost nothing anyway, so you can't really justify the almost £3 delivery charge, which would actually have been almost £6 because they want to charge me per stick. So I decided, you know what? We'll just leave the RAM as it is right now, and I'll probably just end up buying a new hard drive, unless I take a chance and get a used one, but I'm a bit wary of used hard drive. You never know what you're getting. Anyway, let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And today's answer comes from Revenge is Ice Cream 224. And this was about Stephen King being such a prolific author that most people, most households will probably have a Stephen King book. So I was asking what the first yours was, or what the first one you had was. And today's answer comes from Sanctimonious Locke. There is indeed a single Stephen King book sitting on my bookshelf. I've never read it, and I don't know where it came from. And thank you very much for your answer, Sanctimonious Locke. He's probably sneaking into people's houses at night, so when you're in bed and you hear, what's that sound? There's a noise coming from downstairs. And then you tell yourself, no, it's all right. It's just the house settling. Or maybe demons. No! It's actually Stephen King sneaking into your houses and leaving copies of his books. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.